skydiving. Hope comes and stops us in our tracks. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Raw Recovery with Dion Miller. I appreciate everybody being here and listening. As you've noticed, we've been making some change with the podcast, and you're going to see even some more changes next week. There's going to be some pretty exciting stuff. Today, I have brought on a friend of mine, Rob Lohman, and we met in training class, recovery coach training class back in November, and so we got to get to know each other there. I don't know if anybody knows, but when you do trainings, you really get to know people because you're sharing a lot of personal things. You do some role play. You go there and you work on yourself, really. You do. It's about educating yourself, getting more knowledge so we can do the right things. The other cool thing about all of this is Rob is also a podcaster like myself. And we found that it was important to share together. And even though we might be competition, I'd rather call it a healthy competition because that makes it fun. But we're both striving for the same thing and we're on the same team. We say the same thing. We may just say it different. So it's okay. But we all need to realize that we are a team. This is a community effort. And I think that's probably enough for me right now. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce Rob Lohman from Lifted from the Rut. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, thanks a bunch, and excited to be on here chatting with you there, Dion.
It's good to see you, man.
I was thinking back to our training we did together, and it's always good to beef up our skills because there's always new stuff to learn. But I remember that one exercise we did when it was like, if this is part of your life, step forward.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That was crazy. Yeah. That was crazy to just watch everybody. Yeah.
And to get to know and not realizing what other people had been through, just because we are who we are today, people tend to think maybe they go through it. And that's why these stories are important. So that people realize that it doesn't matter where you came from. You can do it. You can make it.
Totally. And I've been through so many things in my life, but when we were doing that exercise, it was like, I haven't been through that.
Yeah.
I haven't been through that. And then it was like, I don't know if I want to step out for that, but I'm going to step out anyway. And that thing of just like taking your external perception out and just be like, hey, this is my life experience, man. This is what we do.
And now I'm comfortable with it. So I'm okay with, we get to a place where, and I know some guys out there may cringe, but we get to a place where we love ourselves and it's okay. And I kind of take that as a different effect, where, maybe I was the only person that they had mentioned, but it's okay to put your foot forward and not have to worry about it being stepped on or judgment or shame or anything that goes with it, which is why we're here. That's why we're here. So people have a place to come to where there is no judgment. If people want to judge us, they can go for it. We don't care. And so that's why we're here. So I'm an advocate.
Yeah.
So can't touch this. So
boom.
So let's get started. Let's get started. Why don't you go ahead and start? Let us know your story. Let's get into it, man.
Well, I remember talking to somebody once before, and I was like, okay, so here's my rap sheet. So we'll see if you can connect with anything in my story that we're going to throw out there. We can talk about divorce, suicide ideation, bankruptcy, recovery, God, 12 steps.
Yep.
Just all the crazy stuff that goes on. But the thing is, it's not terribly unique. It just has a different face on the story itself.
Absolutely.
We've all been through stuff, man. And the cool thing is when you can walk at the time, it didn't make sense, but when you can look back on it, all the stuff I went through now gives me this crazy story that I can relate to so many different people on so many different levels. And that's why I'm like, I can look at my story without disgust or shame or
Uh-huh.
guilt. It's the journey I went through, and I made certain choices, and God
And
allowed
now,
certain things to
and
happen. And
now it's
yeah,
a tool that you
yeah,
utilize. So where it was a deficit, now it's used for something entirely different and gives
yeah,
people hope. So,
yeah. And getting clarity around that, because I used to think it was really cool how I kind of lived like this chameleon life. And
mm-hmm.
it was one of those aspects of I could act differently in any situation. And I thought it was a gift, to which it was really a curse. But
Yeah.
at the time, I just couldn't see it. I was like, oh, I'm just trying to feel accepted and get along with everybody. But in the
Mm-hmm.
meantime, I totally lost who I
You
was.
lost yourself. Yep.
Yeah. That's a scary place to be when you don't even know you're there.
Yeah. And I think that's really the only requirement to get in recovery. I don't care how far down you went. I don't care how old you are. Alcohol doesn't care, neither do I.
Mm.
But everybody lost one thing, and that was themselves. And that's, to me, that's all that really matters. And getting back to finding the person who you really should be or want to be.
Yeah. And you hear families a lot say, well, I just need to wait till Rob hits his bottom. You hear that a lot too. Like,
Yeah.
well, we just need to wait till he hits his bottom till he really wants it. And
Yeah.
this crazy thing is about people in our addictions is that we can have this ability to hit the ground floor, right? We're at the bottom, like the elevator has stopped. There's nowhere else to go, but somehow we find that secret button
Yeah.
that we can push, and we can go 100 stories below, even further. And it's like, I just want to get back to the ground floor.
Yeah. And where is that bottom? There's no real definition for that. A lot of people think that the bottom is living on Skid Row. Okay.
Mm.
And then by the time, I'm not an alcoholic unless I'm living under a bridge, and then we're living under the bridge. And what we say no is, no, I meant that bridge.
Yeah. This one's too nice.
Yeah, this is a very nice bridge. I think those are a lot of the lies that we tell ourselves so that we can continue. And that's part of the disease. Denial is not a river in Africa.
Yeah, but it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, when I look at what I get to do now is awesome to pour into people's lives. But so in some ways I'm grateful for the experience, and I mean, I found sobriety in 2001 after a good 15-year run of insert crazy story, right? And
yeah.
and should have died here and should have died there, and what, you used to jump out of boats at like 60 miles an hour. Well, yeah, it was fun. Like, I didn't think of the consequences. It was just something I did in the spur of the moment, because what I learned was, and I didn't actually really grasp a lot of this until I went to prison in year 11 of my recovery.
Okay.
Which is a story in itself. But in the middle of that, what I learned is I was an extremely impulsive and reactive person.
Yes.
And it was like, thing happened and I would just react, and there wasn't like a filter. And until I went through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I was in prison. There was this one page in it, and it showed this thing of like stimulus and response.
Okay.
And in between that, there is a space and time between stimulus and response.
Yes, there is.
And the more I can focus on like that freedom to choose my response after I got new tools, then I realized I wasn't this impulsive, reactive idiot. I was more of a more wise and calm responder to the situation. So that was like a big eye opener. I'm like, holy cow, like I can actually live in that freedom to choose, and man, it makes life so much better.
Yeah, there is that gap in there, and it can be a big difference. You can make a life decision within that 3 seconds. Like jumping off a boat at 60 miles an hour, breaking your neck. I relate to those stories though too. You and I are the same age, and we grew up in the world of boys will be boys, and so we were kind of free to do which was wrong, so we did a lot of stupid stuff. I'm not going to say I didn't. So where did you grow up at, Rob?
So I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
Which, if no one knows what that is, it's actually the second largest city in Indiana, just in case you're wondering. So total Midwest boy. My cousins lived, just a couple blocks from me. So it was always, my grandma lived, I don't know, equivalent like 5 blocks away. So it was, you know, my family was always around. And so we always had, you know, big Christmases, and we went to church and all those things. So I didn't really have like a, you know, you hear some people's stories, and even in the exercise you and I were talking about when we were doing that coaching training together, was the people would have these traumatic moments in their life as a child.
Yes.
And I didn't really have that. I mean, you know, I had good parents. You know, my dad was really distant. Just because that was his generation of dads.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, no fault of his own. You know, I mean, and his dad's generation was even more distant, right?
Yeah.
And I think our generation's a little too not enough distant for a lot of people. The helicopter
parent, that balance. Yeah.
Yeah. The helicopter parent world. But so again, I mean, you know, things were good. And I feel like a big shift happened for me when we moved when I was 9 years old to Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay.
Complete culture shock to me.
That is yes, it is.
You know, and my parents, again, my dad moved down there for work. And so, you know, doing the best we can as a family and all those things. But I remember in 6th grade, a big shift happened to me. And sometimes I share this, and my mom just feels like, I wish we never would have done that. Like, there's absolutely nothing my parents did to make me an alcoholic and an addict.
Absolutely.
You know, there's nothing that was like, oh, that's why I went this way. But little things happened where I became more and more less secure in me. And I grew up believing in like Jesus Christ and God created me and I'm God's child, and, you know, like all these good messages. None of it coming from, I know some people's experience is a shaming thing of like, well, you did this, you're going to hell. Like none of that stuff.
Okay.
No legalism or anything. So,
all right.
But I remember going to Texas, and we went, I was placed in what I call like a reverse segregation model for school.
All right.
You know, most time we think of like segregation, right, is, you know, blacks and whites, and blacks are the minority, and all, I mean, all this stuff, right, that, you know, back, you know, this is, you know, I'm 9 years old now. So way back 40 years ago, almost, because I'll be 49 in 2 weeks. So, but
I'll be 50.
There you go. Nice. Looking good, man.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah. What's your birth date?
September 18th.
I'm the 19th.
Oh man. Michael Hornbuckle's the 18th also.
Oh, I was just thinking about Hornbuckle this morning driving around. Like, I need to give that guy a call because I was down near his place.
Okay. Yeah, he's pretty busy with the run, I think. But I'd reach out to him.
Yeah, the big poker run for Hornbuckle Foundation. There's a plug, right, guys.
What? Plug in here? We don't do that.
Yeah.
Great.
Support each other.
Run. Yeah.
Like you said, we're all in this world together, whether we're podcasters, recovery coaches, interventionists, whatever. Like, this is a world of abundance and not scarcity, because there's so many people that need help. So
absolutely.
I'm all about promoting other people's stuff. And, but I remember, like, I went to this school, and we were like the first kind of like, you know, white group to be, as a whole class, to be put in this pretty much all black school.
Okay.
You know, and I experienced a lot of, at that age, just things I didn't feel like you should experience at that age, no matter what color you are or anywhere, you know, just, feeling very, very, very out of place. And it's almost like I was made to feel that way, is just like, again, reversing that to what happened back in the day. It was just, you know, just the slavery and all those kind of things, you know, and just I'm white, someone's black, someone's brown, someone's whatever. I don't care. We're all God's children. And anyway, we could probably go on.
And that's how you felt at 9.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, so I went to this school in 6th grade, and it was very traumatic, and I couldn't wait to get out of there, and went back to Montague Middle School, which was a good mix of a lot of people. And, but I just remember there was a shift that happened in me at that age. And I guess 6th grade, we're more like, you know, 11 years old or whatever. But I just remember that. And then age 14 comes, and alcohol was like always around our family.
Okay.
Not because my parents drank a lot, but it was the social thing to do.
Yeah, wine at Thanksgiving, things like that. Sure, my parents.
Yeah, wine, scotch. But summers in Michigan were always, you know, a lot of drinking. I have an older brother, so I had older friends, and they'd be getting drunk. And so 14 was like my first real get drunk moment.
Okay.
And I remember a guy showed up with a 6-pack of beer to this youth event, you know, nice Christian youth event. And he said, "Hey, Loman, do you want to drink some beer?" And I was like, "Cool, 2 girls, 6-pack of beer, why not?" So we, you know, sneaked back in the little alleyway, and I remember just slamming those first 3 beers, and each one of them kind of nursed their beer.
Yeah.
And I remember getting in the car after the party, and my mom looks at me. She's like, "What is wrong with your eyes?" I was like, I didn't know they were bloodshot. First time I'd really been buzzed. And I said, "Oh, Mom, these contacts are so bad. Like they're killing my eyes." So I took my contacts out in front of her. And that was the time of lying and excuses. And
right off the bat.
Yeah, right off the bat. Why not? I'm not going to get in trouble for drinking.
Yeah,
and
alcohol changed you immediately.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would say like alcohol was like became my master at that time. But again, I was your funny go lucky kid. I had good grades. I was, pretty good in sports, and, did your door-to-door magazine sales all the time. And so, but Fort Worth was just different. So if you're from Fort Worth and you love it, that's great. I personally never felt like I really connected or fit in.
Sure.
But I was extremely popular. I was like senior class president. But I was very insecure still. So anyway, just fast forward. That was like 15 years. Went to college, got my MBA, and then graduated college with a biology degree. Somehow I made it by in 4 years.
Okay.
I got arrested in college once and had to, got sentenced to go to those AA meetings.
Oh, no, those freaking AA classes. You still you have to go to those, man.
Those things don't work. That, and my mentality back then was like, this sucks. It was a bunch of old guys and talking about, I lost their car and their boat and their dog. And I'm like, dude, I'm swinging single and I got a bunch of girlfriends. So I was already convinced myself I was invincible.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I was lonely, but I had a lot of friends. I was desperate, but you saw me having fun. I was really smart, but I was failing courses and, potential and alcohol in the same room. Mm-hmm. Alcohol wins every time. But graduation day, I have both sets of my grandparents, aunts and uncles came down from Fort Wayne to Greencastle, Indiana.
Cool.
My parents are there, but I did not know. I was the only one that did not know if I was going to graduate that day. Nobody else had any clue about this but me.
Okay.
And I remember my professor I had to pass his class to even get a good enough grade in my GPA to graduate.
Okay.
And so I remember he called me in that day, the day of graduation, the morning of graduation. He calls me in, and I scurry over there, and he goes, "Lohman, sit down." And I'm thinking, oh, dude, this is not good. Like, my parents are seriously going to kill me.
Well,
they just spent like $120,000 on college, and I'm this total loser, alcoholic, drunk person sitting in this chair. And so my professor pulls his my test out, and it was 5 pages, and he's like, "Let me tell you what your scores were, Lohman." Paraphrasing. He looks at the first page. He's like, 98. Flips the page. 99. Flips the page. Basically, he goes, "This is the highest score I've ever had on any exam at this university." And I'm like, "Okay, did I pass?" He's like, "Yes." And I just took off. I didn't even say thank you. I was just gone. And that was me. I knew I had the goods, but alcohol took over, and
now was that a foxhole prayer for you?
No, I didn't I never did foxhole prayers.
Okay. I was just curious.
Because I knew I was going to do it again, and I wasn't going to, and I didn't want to blaspheme God and say, "God, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again," because I knew I was going to do it again.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, if I had consequences, I'd take them, but I just somehow always got out of them because as people in our substances and addictions, we have a great tendency to talk our way out of things.
Yes, we do.
Maybe you talked yourself out of a couple of things. I don't know. Oh, it's highly possible.
I knew that. I talked my kids into letting me go to the concert and have beer.
Yeah, I think I talked myself into things back then also.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, shut your mouth, Lohman. But, I graduated college with a biology degree. Always wanted to go to medical school, but just didn't have the ambition. Always wanted to be like my grandpa, who was a great doctor. Papa, I love you, man. But just didn't have the drive. And I graduated college, and I basically moved out to Vail, Colorado for a year and a half. My parents agreed to let me do that. As I promised, I'd only be there for a year and a half. But really, I mean, just go. We'll just fast forward to year 2001.
All right.
I mean, that was when I was in a really desperate spot. I went through I had previously been married. It was a very short marriage, a good alcoholic marriage, based on, sex and drinking and just going out and having fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't a whole lot of intimacy there, because in my drinking days, I didn't develop that skill set, how to have an intimate, meaning an emotional relationship with a woman, because they were all shallow. And, there were a lot of women I really loved and cared about, but I didn't really know what it was, because that whole cognitive part of our brain that doesn't stop developing till we're 26. I thrashed that from 14 to 29.
Yeah.
So I do believe when we get clean and sober, and sorry if I say a word like offends someone, but whatever, we're in recovery and life is different. And,
that's right.
I think people get hung up on that a lot in our culture. And, but what I do know is that I would agree, I was like a 15-year-old kid at 29.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Emotionally. So if people are like smoking pot now just to deal with anxiety, well, I'll tell you this, if you're 14, 15, 16 years old smoking pot to deal with anxiety, guess what? When you're an adult, you're going to really suck at dealing with anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're absolutely right. And that's just undealt trauma.
Yeah.
You know, when we start drinking and drugging at a young age, it stunts that growth.
Yeah. If you don't believe it, try it out.
Yeah. And come back to us in a couple of years. Let us know it didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know until I got sober and in recovery, I didn't have a successful relationship. I didn't know what they looked like. You know, because I stunted myself with drugs and alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had several girlfriends that, I don't know if that said to me, like, I just feel like we're friends. Like the depth just wasn't there. And so, I'm glad I'm not as bad now. I mean, I still struggle in that regards, of, for some reason, intentionally withholding love from my wife. I don't know why. Still stuff I work on today. There's always stuff to work on, and
sure.
And that's just kind of getting over other stuff. But, so a few months before, I found sobriety in 2001, I was doing a lot with suicide ideation.
All right.
But I was afraid to tell other people that, because then they would want to do what with me?
Lock you up.
Yeah.
Put you away.
Yeah. Lose my job. Like, you're crazy. I don't want to go out with you. It's like, you're thinking what? But I mean, I would literally have these moments of driving down the highway and seeing my car veer off to the left and hit a median and see myself dead.
Yeah.
I would see myself, robbing people or whatever. I didn't do that, but I would see myself like doing like, oh, there's a purse. I could take that and run real quick, or just things in my head that were just mind blowing. And then one night I was hanging out in a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I always say this because it's pretty true. I mean, I drank and drove like 8 nights a week.
Okay.
Like, I was on the road a lot with alcohol in my system. Fortunately, as far as I know, in my recollection of my life, I've never heard anybody from drinking and driving.
Thank God.
And when I got sober and I told my sponsor, I'm like, man, I just don't know. He's like, hey, trust me, if you hurt someone drinking and driving, you'll find out later.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll know.
Yeah, you can't
God's
go there.
Gonna let you know.
Yeah, the blackout stuff. But this night I was hanging out in the bar, and it was girls and music and everything, and I went out all the time, and all of a sudden this bar gets completely dead silent. And I audibly hear the words, "You're done."
Wow.
And then the bar got really loud again. And I'm 99.999% sure I'm the only one that happened to. And what I thought I was saying was God was saying, you're finally done drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I look at my buddy Sean O'Brien and I say, hey, Sean, I got to go. I think I'm finally done drinking. And he laughs it off and see you tomorrow type thing. And so I go home, and I'm driving home like with just emotional tears, because I don't know what's going on. Like, I feel like I'm sober and I'm drunk and I'm going to live, I'm going to die, whatever. I'm done drinking. I don't know. And I get to my apartment and walk up 12 flights of stairs in my, 1-bedroom loft apartment with a gym in the middle of it. And, cause you had to look good in recovery. Yeah. Girls came over like, oh, wow, you like to work out. I was like, well, that's why I'm so fit. And a little full of myself.
Yeah.
But I was just lost and confused and just trying to fit in to be accepted, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I was pretty gone that night, pretty desperate. And the next thing I knew, I was, lifting a bar off of my weightlifting rack with 350 pounds on it to drop it across my chest.
Yeah.
and that was going to be my out. And in the moment of that, what I believe happened was God held that bar.
Yep.
'Cause I do believe God can allow things to happen and stop things to happen.
Certainly.
For the greater good, the greater purpose of whatever his big plan is, because I had a purpose for my life when I was born, and I believe that.
I do too.
And I always believed that God was keeping me alive for a bigger purpose. But this night was different, and I was ready to take my life. And remember unhooking my elbows, and that bar was coming down. And what I believe was God grabbed that bar and said, "Jake, my dog, go talk to him." And so my dog literally is sitting there right next to me with his head on my knee and just kind of nudging my leg and just like, "Dad, what are you doing?
Don't leave me."
Yeah. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, who's going to feed you tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Holy crap, what am I doing? I started thinking about my parents. And meanwhile, this is milliseconds of time. God's still holding that bar, and he puts that bar back on the rack. And I felt different in that moment. Poured out 2 full bottles of Glenfiddich scotch, which you got to have expensive scotch in your house when you drink by yourself before you go out.
That's very expensive.
Yeah, no one else drank it but me in my own house. And but in that moment, like, I felt peace that night. I slept in peace, and made that phone call in the morning to get some help to my parents. But I meant to call my Aunt Carol, who'd been sober for about 25 years at that time. But my mom, that was the call. So moms, dads, wives, spouses, friends, don't ever quit praying for your loved one to find help, because that was my mom's answered prayer. And she had no clue how desperate I really was, but that moment right there was just amazing healing and just release of pain for the first time.
Yeah. And that's the spiritual experience we talk about. It's the psychic change. And that's a very powerful one.
Yeah. Well, and it was so powerful, the fact that I didn't go through detox or withdrawal. I've never had a craving since that day, 19 years ago. And so I'm in this small percentage of people, but it was just like I had never, ever, ever consumed alcohol. And I went to my first AA meeting that day in the back of a bar. And we literally walked from the front door to the bar. We did from the front door. My aunt walked me to the back of the bar, and I found people that were happy, joyous, and free, just like the material says. I believed them, and I was just hook, line, and sinker. I'm kind of one of those all-in guys. I was like, hook, line, and sinker, I'm in, and started doing recovery, hitting meetings, being GSR, like anything I could, getting rid of all the negative things in my house, like CDs. I actually threw my television in the trash, like everything, cleaned house, and I loved early recovery.
Yeah. I actually miss early recovery sometimes, because you're finding out so much about yourself and everything's so new, and not that I'm not learning anything new, but it certainly isn't in the abundance that it was. So I get what you're saying. It's like when you were a kid and went to Elitch's or whatever, went to the park. You just don't get that same feeling anymore when you're an adult. So
yeah, there's a genuine just childlikeness about it. And you meet people and you realize, relationships are more about depth than anything else. And so you form these deep relationships with men and women, and have conversation, to just have conversation with somebody. And so early recovery was kind of easy for me.
Okay.
Because I was so desperate, and I'd never wanted to go back there again. So did the step work, went through the steps, got open and honest, threw it all out there, the best of my ability. Never sought outside help, which I look back on, I was like, that probably would have been a good idea too, to get some counseling, but I didn't.
Okay.
So I had community and friends and a program, and that was it. And that's all I needed. So for those that say like these programs never work. Yeah. Well, I look for the similarities instead of differences, because my sponsor told me that. He said, stay in the solution, not in the bitching sessions at some meetings, and those are good for some people. It wasn't going to work for me. I stayed in the solutions. I stayed in the big book. I stayed in the 12 and 12, Yeah. And that's what worked for me. I tried Celebrate Recovery. It didn't work for me at that time. It did later on in my life.
Sure.
But now there's all sorts of recovery capital out there, between Smart Recovery and Refuge, which I now it's been renamed to something else. But all these different modalities that can help people that I they may have existed back then, but no one talked about them.
Yeah, I think it was almost faux pas to kind of talk about it. Anything that, and I'm an AA, or I love AA. I'm the first one to tell you AA is not the only way.
Yeah.
You're still going to do the work.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just going to be in a different setting. I do think that we all need to be in an area free of shame and judgment to get this done. We don't need to put more of that on ourselves.
Not at all. And as an interventionist, and families call and say, we want to get my loved one into treatment. And I'll ask them the question, well, let's kind of back up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we'll talk through, why do we feel the need to get them into a treatment program?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll say, well, because and we'll talk through the options that are out there and say, well, I don't know what the best option is yet until I get to know your family and the whole story. And, and I've helped a lot of guys just having coffee with them and just saying, hey, like, do you want help?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell families, have you asked your loved one if they actually want help?
Yeah, we need to know that willingness level so we know what we're working with.
Yeah.
Sometimes all we can do is go in and educate. Maybe nothing will happen that day, but 2 years down the road, that guy may go, okay, I'm ready. I remember what that Rob guy said. I hate him, but maybe he's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, people love me, hate me, or something in the middle. But it's having those honest conversations, and a lot of family members haven't even asked their loved one if they want help. They're just pissed off at what's happening.
Yeah.
Without looking in the mirror, understanding how they all got there together.
Yeah, and they've watched enough television to know that treatment's the next one. Yeah. So people, you guys don't use television to compare treatment and stuff, because it's not how it works. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't see the IOP show on A&E.
No. All right.
Or the 12-step recovery meeting world on A&E. But it has opened the door for, I think, families to learn that there is a way to help their loved one. And like, I did that Art of Intervention Project Summit recently, that 21-day online summit, and so many different resources, so many different angles that people look at helping a loved one, that when you can understand these and explore it and get expert feedback on certain things, then you can say, wow, I never knew these things actually existed.
Yeah. And just educating yourself, because for me, I'm not a yoga person, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to run into somebody that isn't.
Yeah.
And I actually have a person that does that and works with your anxiety and PTSD. They're a therapist, and the thing is, we are unique, but we're not terminally unique.
Right.
So we all have our different things. But really, what's going to be best for you? And that's what it comes down to, because you're the one that matters.
Yeah. And recovery evolves. I want people to hear that too. Like, when I got sober, I was single.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of time. I didn't have kids. I had a job, which I was getting ready to lose, but that was okay because it led to something else. But there was a lot of collateral damage from, even though I just found sobriety, it wasn't like, oh, wow, things are great. Like, learning how to live life on life's terms. Learning how to honestly play golf sober, go on a date sober, read a book sober. Just sit by a pool sober, whatever, go camping sober, like all these new things. It actually was go to a concert. Oh my gosh, go to a concert sober. That
was a hard one for me the first time. Yeah.
Like without being on mushrooms or acid or drunk or whatever. So it was a lot of newness, but as time went on, and I met my current wife, who's amazing. Hey babe. Hey Jennifer. I was emotionally immature.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of insecurities, which I didn't know of. So, and then my son was born in 2007, and I had been a father before.
Yeah.
Now there's other things coming up. Like, now I got to provide, like, and I still have this gambling addiction that's going on that never went away until 20 months ago.
Okay.
But I had a really bad relationship with money.
Okay.
Which I didn't know of. I had a issue with quick fixes.
Yeah.
Which, was a problem too. So there's these other underlying things that were not dealt with in early recovery because I didn't know I needed to deal with them because they weren't staring me in the face. But
correct.
As time went on, and I wasn't being like the best husband, because like our lives, my wife, we started our marriage like not like this, but kind of like this.
Okay.
You're not, obviously,
He had his hands together and then apart,
so
guys.
it was like intertwined, but because my wife worked in the entertainment industry, not that kind of entertainment industry. Get your heads out of the gutter. No, she worked for a Christian radio station doing concerts and events.
Awesome.
And so it was nights and weekends, right? And I had an insurance agency, which was nights and weekends. And so we didn't connect very well in the beginning. And, and I wasn't doing a great job providing as a husband financially. And then again, my wife and I had different relationships with money and things like that too. So over time, I just started feeling like I wasn't measuring up.
Yeah.
And now granted, there are things that we can say to each other, right? I can tell you, Dion, you're a fool. And if you don't believe you're a fool, it will just go off your back and it's gone. Like, whatever, I'm not, that's dumb. Like, but if I feel like I am, then that can add a little more to that. Like, you know what, maybe you are. And so over time, my daughter was born in 2010. So now I have two children. We are, I'm struggling and I have an insurance business now that I'm getting off the ground. So in 2011, the wheels were falling off, man. It was like my insurance office was actually like 4 blocks from the Arid Club. Like when it was over off of like Colfax and Kipling. Right.
Yeah.
And it was right there, but I didn't go. Right. The apartment we lived in was right by the Data Time Club.
Yeah. But
I didn't go very often because I became too busy. I had to get a deal done to pay bills. So my what I thought was a faith-driven life I used to have now became a fear-driven life. And I wasn't trusting God. And maybe I never really trusted him that well before. I was just in this cloud, right?
Yeah.
Thinking I did because, I was a very simple person. But as time went on, I really started doubting myself again. And in November 1st, 2011, I lost my insurance agency just due to sales and production numbers.
Okay.
My wife quit her job in December 2011 at the radio station because her adrenals were shot and she was just exhausted. And
it's hard work.
And she gave him a 4-month notice. But so here we are in this space of neither of us having income. And my wife was kind of excited about it. She's like, I can't wait. We're going to have more time together and connect. And I'm just kind of like, she hates me. She thinks I'm a loser. I stink as a father, like all this negative chatter that the enemy wants me to believe. And I started believing it. I started to believe I had failed as a father, failed as a husband. I lost my business. What a loser you are. So suicide ideation starts kicking in again. One thing I didn't share, and I want to say this for your audience, because there may be people out there that experience this and might feel like they're alone.
Yeah.
So before I lost my agency, a couple months before that, and you see a similar pattern here because before I got sober, I was dealing with suicide ideation, seeing myself die. Right. Yep. And when this part of my life is happening, I'm getting ready to lose my agency and thinking I stink and suck as a loser, which God does not say that about me. So that's not from him. But one night I was sitting in my insurance office and I was paralyzed by fear. I couldn't figure out what to do with all the stacks of paper. And I just out of nowhere, just took my fist and hit myself in the side of the head. And we were talking about dopamine rushes before you started recording this, right? And And that right there, I mean, I literally remember having a flash of light in my brain and I was like, oh, and I just started getting to work.
Yeah.
So some people like to cut. Some people like to go masturbate. Some people like to do whatever to kind of like get the juices flowing again. Right. And, but mine was physical harm and it felt good in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it snapped me to where I needed to be. But over time, I started doing that more and more to where it hurt to even put my glasses on or even touch the side of my head because it was so tender.
Yeah. Wow.
But again, if I told you I was doing that, what are you going to do to me, Dion?
Yeah.
Get me locked up or something.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to tell people.
Yeah. You need to see a shrink. You're messed up. My kids aren't coming to your house. Well, you're crazy. So That was my own little secret. And man, I prayed. I was like, God, why? Like there's scripture that talks about like, God, why do I keep doing the things I don't want to do and don't do the things I wish to do? And I didn't want to hurt myself, but I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I was mentally unstable and messed up and making other bad decisions too. So in February of 2012, now, if you remember, I got sober, right? In 2001. So you think 11 years later.
We're 11 years sober.
Yeah. Yeah, life should be great. Bank account should be full, great relationships, and I'm a complete wreck.
Yep.
Like right back to where I was then, just a different guy. And so, but 2012, I ended up having a major mental breakdown one evening.
Okay.
Sitting in my apartment in Lakewood, Colorado, and I was, unemployed. I didn't have my job. I always have a side hustle, like a network marketing thing, because that always keeps me employed. So I can never have a gap. That's why I tell people when I'm coaching them. Sometimes I'm like, dude, just have a network marketing thing on the side, because that means you're always a rep somewhere. So you never are unemployed. That can always be on your resume. So now we're going to get into the pitch tonight. So now I want to introduce you to my network marketing company. Just kidding. But I was sitting there that night, and there were just a lot of triggers going on that were reminding me that I had failed. We watched this inspirational movie that night called 7 Days in Utopia.
Okay.
Great movie, golf movie, total movie about redemption. The guy redeems his life and his relationship with all these things. But part of the movie is his father, which this is not my relationship with my dad, but his father, he felt like he was never good enough for his dad. Based on things that were said or the way really what it boils down to how you internalize stuff. Yeah. And so I felt like I was not good enough for my wife. And so that trigger is screaming at me in this great movie inspiration. You watch it, go watch 7 Days in Utopia. You'll be like, this is amazing. Okay. It's a good movie. So, but that night I was everything was just collapsing in my head and I didn't know it. And out of nowhere, I just said, screw it. I'm just going to go organize the townhouse. Which I don't know about you, but I had a big problem with clutter, but I didn't know it psychologically at the time. But I really did have a problem with things being out of place. Yeah. Which explained a lot of my past. But that night I got up to just organize the townhouse. And the next thing I knew, I had lit some boxes on fire on my covered patio in a huge mental blackout. Uh-oh. Yeah. Uh-oh. And so imagine like sitting where you are now on your covered patio, right? Yeah. And it was a carpeted patio. And once I realized what I had done, I was like, holy crap. I don't cuss a lot, but I said a lot of things to myself in that moment. Yeah. And it was like, beep, beep. And I was like, holy shit, I need to get upstairs and like get my kids and my wife out of the house. It was 1:30 in the morning. Yeah. And so I shut the sliding glass door. We get out safely. Nobody got hurt physically. I got all my neighbors out. But it was a massive fire in Lakewood. Huge. We lost everything pretty much in our townhouse. A couple of our neighbors had some damage, just due to smoke and firefighters and things like that. But water. It was just incredible how I got to that point in my life. And what I'll say is some people are like, well, why the heck? That was stupid. Why would you do that? I'm like, wasn't in my right mental space, y'all. And absolutely. It's like saying, why would you get behind a car and drink 2 bottles of tequila and run into a bridge? Well, I didn't plan on it when I woke up that morning. Yeah. And so that was very traumatic for everybody involved, myself, my wife, my kids. But, the addict kicks in. I'm like, I got to cover this up. So I made up a huge ass story. And the next morning, that story was oddly enough collaborated by my neighbors that there were some kids doing things on people's porches and trying to break into front doors in my neighborhood. Okay. And so I thought, I think I can get away with this. But then my faith is kicking in underneath my skin and my heart. And I'm like, dude,
it's not sitting right.
You can't lie about this. And even the investigator was like, if you tell me everything that happened, man, I promise you'll never see the inside of a jail cell. And I'm like, yeah, right. I'm not listening to you. And that turned out to be true. I didn't trust him at all. But anyway, long story short is, June 15th, actually it was June 8th of 2012, I ended up confessing to what I did to the authorities. Okay. They they did not arrest me. We tried to turn ourselves in multiple times to the department, but they just
Okay.
wouldn't respond to our calls. And in that moment, I turned everything over to God.
Yeah.
And it was out of my control. Control is an illusion anyway. And I just trusted the process. So about 6 months later, I got arrested on 19 felonies and 13 misdemeanors.
Ooh, okay.
And they knew where I was the whole time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of my own theories of what happened. Like I can imagine my neighbors would have liked to have known in June when I called and told the authorities I had set the fire, because they didn't know for 6 more months.
Yeah.
You know, but neither here nor there. I'll never know the answer to the weird things that happen there. But again, God's in control.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 days or a couple days later, my wife, was in court to, sitting there like, who is this guy? Let's get his things moving along. And that so many miracles happened in our story that I was able to come home to live with my family on a modified protection order.
Okay.
And the healing process is starting to begin. I ran back to church. I ran back to AA meetings. I ran back to mentors, psychologists, shrinks, counselors, being as honest as I could at the time.
Yeah.
And then we started bringing our community in one by one, saying, hey, here's what happened. I'm sorry I lied to you, but we need support.
Mm-hmm.
And was received by a majority of people well, and they loved us well.
That's
a lot
awesome.
were just pissed off, angry, and confused of like, how could you get there? And other people, until they went through their own mental breakdown later on in their life, they didn't really get a good understanding of where I was then.
Exactly.
Because you haven't been through it.
Yeah.
You can judge people. You can look at them and say, well, that was dumb. It's like, when you go through your own mental breakdown because of life, then you can come talk to me and I'll explain more.
Yeah. You really can't. And I understand. I had an anxiety and a mental breakdown at a year sober, and you can't describe it. I was lost in the grocery store. I literally didn't know where I was at. My wife had to find me and take me home because we don't know. And it's really, and it's hard to talk about. And it's hard to talk about because it's scary, because we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then we don't have control over our actions. And that's even more scary to us, especially in recovery. So I'm really glad to hear that you went back to basics and started getting help.
Yeah. Well, you got to. I mean, it's keep life simple. And
yeah.
So, 8 months later, I go to my court date and we pled down to 2 charges. And I was looking at anywhere from 2 years to 56 years in prison for that.
Okay.
I didn't know anybody that had been incarcerated before this.
Okay.
Now I know a lot of people that have, not because I went to prison, but because of people I've met outside. And
yeah, because of your experience.
Yeah. And it was like that when I left and anyway, the judge gave me a 13-year prison sentence in 2013.
Okay.
And suspended 8 as long as I completed a 5-year charge.
Okay.
So I went through the door, they slapped the gavel, and I thought I was just gone for the first time. And so if your loved one and you're listening is getting ready to go to the system and you don't know anyone that's ever dealt with this system before, find somebody that understands it, because my wife had to learn, how the heck do I navigate this? Like, when the heck is my husband is he really gone for 5 years? I mean, what am I going to do for 5 years? I'm assuming, I mean, the stuff she had to go through that I put her through because of that evening.
Yeah.
And it's not just that evening. That evening was a culmination of years that led to that breakdown in my life. So things could have been prevented way before that. But I remember going through there and I just thought I was gone, and we had to learn this process together.
Yeah.
Learn about good time and halfway houses and all this stuff. So through the process, thank God, I went to a minimum security camp in Delta, Colorado. Okay. And I capitalized on that time away to figure out who the heck I was again.
Yeah.
Like, what is my faith? I mean, I've been a Christian my whole life. I believe in Jesus Christ. That's my faith, and that's what I believe in. But I never, ever, ever spent time to understand it.
Yeah.
Now I had time. So, I read 42 books when I was gone, and went to like 12 life learning classes, and finally read the Bible front to back. And what happened was I was able to figure out who the heck is Rob Lohman again. And I think that's the biggest problem in our whole entire world, is that people don't really know who the heck they are.
Yeah. Or ever give themselves a chance to find out.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe they're not getting it in time and they're not giving it the right amount of time. Thing is, we have nothing but time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, that's what you and I get doing our coaching now, is help people find that center of who they really are. Because recovery is not about, like, it's just, honestly, it's not about just going to meetings and not drinking and focusing on these relapse prevention things. It's about what is going to trigger your recovery forward, and finding a purpose in your life. Because I just want to say this again, like, God created all of us for a purpose. We are still alive. We have not died in our addictions yet. Or if you don't have an addiction and you still feel purposeless, you built the $1 billion company and your family life stinks because you're a horrible husband or wife or whatever, or a terrible father in your mind. Well, that's just what you're telling yourself. Let's get those beliefs out of your head.
Yep.
Because obviously you've done some things right along the way.
That's just my old self talking to me again, trying to get, because my mind tends to feel more comfortable in all that drama because it's where I lived for such a long time. Yeah. I know how to navigate that, without even really thinking about it. So, we start replacing these bad habits with good ones. And I really like what you said there. Trigger yourself forward.
Yeah. Recovery triggers.
That's fantastic. Why not utilize words that are bad to make them good? I love that stuff.
Yeah. Like I'm big on, like, creating a recovery playlist of music and, creating an acronym about your top 5 values in your life. Some things I do with my clients, and just like these things of, like, believing in who you are, but you can't believe in who you are until you know who you are. And
absolutely.
So that's what I learned when I was incarcerated, is who am I? And my wife, God bless her, she was back home being mom and dad, disciplinarian and nurturer, provider, and this. And what I loved seeing was that this community just came around my wife. I prayed for that every day, and they just came around, like, jobs that she needed at the right time to get the income that she needed. I mean, she even prayed for, like, a specific number of hours, something per hour that she needed. And literally she gets this call and she goes, "Hey, Jen, I think we'd like to move you into this other avenue. And the pay is X, X, and X." And she's like, "You gotta be kidding me." So God's listening.
She deserved. Did she earned it? She deserved it.
Yeah. I mean, God took care of her. And so 2 promises God gave me when I was away was, 1, your marriage is healed.
Wow.
Now, a lot of times, like, you can say healed is current now. It's already healed.
Yeah.
Now, the date it's healed, you may not feel it till later.
Yeah.
And then I feel like God gave me the promise that, I don't feel like, I know he did, that you'll get the halfway house in the first round.
Yeah.
And they don't let arsonists in the halfway houses, just to let you know.
Yeah. Not usually, there's a reason why.
Yeah, insurance will cover it.
And they like to set fires.
Yeah, and but because of my community and people that sent letters to this place, ACTC here in Inglewood, the director at the time said, "You know what? We're going to take a chance on you because you seem like you get a lot to lose, and I'm just going to believe you made a bad error in judgment because you're educated, you've got a wife who's still with you, 2 young kids."
Yeah.
You seem like you have drive and ambition. So I did everything I could. I was your squeaky clean guy for, 11 months. So I was only really gone for almost 22 months of what I was supposed to be gone for, potentially 13 years.
Oh, nice.
And but in that, I didn't take a lot of things for granted. One thing I will say, and my wife and I have continued to work through this, is I still harbored some resentments for things that happened in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't let those go, because when you're in prison, like, you're not getting to counseling.
Yeah,
and I'm sure as heck, I'm sure as heck not going to tell my case manager what's going on,
or your pod father or somebody,
Yeah, it's like, well, let me tell you exactly how I feel. Like, no way. So I didn't really ever talk about things, and I held on. And resentments suck. They just keep the individual holding it trapped, And so, so here's what's really cool though. So life went on. With felonies and stuff, it was hard to get a good job when I got home. So a friend of mine said, hey, you should get trained to do interventions and coaching.
Yeah.
And so 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, I got trained through a program to learn how to do interventions and coaching. And since then, I've continued to go through other intervention programs and other coaching programs to add skills and, and just learn the benefits and the processes and how to help people. And I don't care what it is. If people call me for a resource and I'm not the right guy, I'll send them to someone else. Like I don't want people to not get help because they don't have money.
Exactly.
But again, this is a business. It's not just charity that I do. So I coach a lot of people, no charge, and help people with intervention discounts and ones that can pay full price. I mean, I have a nonprofit that's part of my business that people can donate money to even help me help other people. Right. So
exactly.
I put these things in place, but here's the cool thing about the marriage with my wife. And again, I've admittedly said, I've had my own issues with intentionally withholding love because of whatever and my own pains. And I've apologized for that and repented and confessed and asked for forgiveness. And I didn't do it very well. And then we went through this 4.5 month program called Peacemakers.
Okay.
And it was individual, like therapy, individual counseling. Now, these weren't licensed therapists and counselors. It's just a really good program. And they've been through a lot of stuff themselves. But what it was for 4.5 months, for 2 hours a week, there was 2 hours every other week, 2 hours every other week. I just forgot. Anyway, whatever. But we did it individually until they thought we were mature enough to come together.
Okay.
So like AA, like 12 steps, like whatever, like own your side of the street, buddy, and quit blaming her. So a shift happened for me. So if anyone out there's blaming your spouse for your problems, well, because I used to say, well, we got here together.
Right.
And that just pissed her off because it was like, no, you're the one that did what you did. And I was like, yeah, but if you were this, I wouldn't have been this. And if I was this, you wouldn't. And it was this blame game, right? And then the shift happened where it was like, it doesn't matter. Like if someone calls me an idiot or a fool, you're stupid, or you're just a heathen, or, hey, you're an amazing Christian man, or you're a great business leader, whatever it is, if all those things make me feel one way or the other, then the way I internalize it, that's what I have to own.
That's it. And it's the only thing you can own.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you can control.
Yeah. So I had to quit blaming other people and had to say, you know what? It doesn't matter if what was said to you was hurtful. What matters is the way you internalize that is you believed it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm huge in my coaching when I talk to people like, you've got to get to the center of who you are, because if anything comes at you that contradicts that, discard it.
Yeah.
If you got 40 people coming saying, hey, Loman, you're a little off these days. If I told all of them they're wrong, well, I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
But if anything contradicts what God says about me, it is wrong.
Yeah.
And it is not true. But I chose to internalize all these things. So once I was able to get past that, like, oh my gosh, dude, like, stop it. Like, you got to own it. You got to own it, Rob. And I owned it. And again, still continue to work in process. But at the end of that, we had amazing, biblical confessions, reconciliation, healing between the two of us. It was
fantastic.
We both had these false narratives about the other person, which weren't even true. But it was just how we internalized it. And that wasn't fair to my wife, and it wasn't fair to me, like on either end.
Exactly.
Right?
It wasn't fair to you.
Yeah. And it was like the things that she had told herself about me that weren't true, and the things I had told myself about her weren't true, because, we're all beautiful people that have bigger purpose. And so, I just learned to not, and that's why I'm not judgmental, and just kind of, people are what people are, and
that's it.
I can love them for who they are and how they're made, and help encourage change if they want it. And but here's the coolest part. Let me share the coolest part real quick. So
do that.
While we were going through this, my wife said, honey, the only cruise I would ever want to go on in my life is a family life marriage cruise. It's a Christian cruise. It's all, they charter this whole big boat and everything. So after we get done with this 4.5 months, a friend of my wife's reached out to her and said, hey, Jen, my husband and I cannot go on this cruise. And instead of selling it, we feel like God said, give it to somebody. And we were wondering, would you and Rob want to go on a cruise in February 2020? And Jen talked to me about it. I was like, because we didn't really have the extra money at the time
Sure.
in a sense, with all these other things going on, to say, yeah, we need a couple $1,000s to like do these extra things. I'm like, we don't need to do extra stuff. Let's just go. So we're like, heck yeah. So in February of this year, right before COVID came, we were blessed and went on my first cruise ever, and hers, a free 8-day cruise with 2,100 other couples working on their marriage. And the one thing I really wanted to do on that cruise, well, I mean, besides connect with my wife and no kids and all that kind of fun stuff, and just have conversations on the deck and just enjoy each other, was I really wanted to find a recovery meeting on that ship.
Yeah.
And they had them.
Yeah. I believe it.
Yeah, the best meeting we had was in the pool. We were getting to know, I was swimming laps. My wife was getting to know a couple there, and we just started talking. And it was like, you can kind of tell when someone has a story.
Yep.
You can kind of look and say, yeah, there's a story there.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
You can see it in their eyes.
We started talking to this one couple, and then we started talking to another couple, and all of a sudden you knew this guy hears us talk. He said, hey, I have a prison ministry. And so basically you have like 5 couples where one or both had all been in prison, and were in recovery from addiction in the middle of this pool, in the middle of the ocean. And it was so beautiful how it all came together. So anyway, I feel blessed to what I get to do now, to help families, individuals, and do podcasting, and come on your show, and I'll have you on my show and just share the hope with people. Like, it's cool.
It is. And like we were saying in the beginning, it's important to tell these stories. And if your wife could pray for some concert tickets for me.
Yeah. Which concert do you want to go to? She's not there anymore, but we got connections. Which one do you want to go to?
Well, no, it just seems like her prayers really work.
Yeah.
So, she's doing something right. I love hearing all the gifts from God. A lot of times we get in the program, we ask why me? And this is exactly why right here. So that we can sit down and share our experience and let people know you're not alone. When you were talking about your suicidal idealizations, I went through those too, man. And that is so morbid. And then I continue on with it, even though I know that I'm doing it. And this happens in recovery, guys. We're not talking about drinking right now. We're actually talking about the recovery. And I don't want to say beyond recovery or, anything like that, because why limit yourself on that? It's kind of like think outside the box.
Yeah.
You were a salesperson. Think outside the box. Well, why is there a box? I never understood that. People said it. Anyway, we'll get out of our sales portion here.
Yeah. Well, either way you look at it, like there's a hole missing. If our spiritual conditioning is horrible, we're going to figure out ways to fill it, whether it's thinking about suicide, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, shopping, whatever it is. We're going to find something so we feel better in that moment. But and I tell my 10 and 12-year-old this all the time, no matter what happens at school, no matter what happens with friends, anything, because kids are cruel, right? They go to really great school, but kids are still cruel.
Yeah.
Like, if we can seriously figure out who we are at the core and believe that, and if anything ever contradicts that, discard it.
Yeah.
Pay attention to it, but discard it. Because if it's against what you believe to be true about yourself, get rid of it. If it complements it, then keep it. But if you don't believe in yourself, then that negative stuff will complement it, and the next thing you know, you're wanting to take your life. Yeah.
So if we teach them right, and then teach them to trust their instincts, listen to, I tell people this a lot, listen to your gut, man. I don't listen to this. I'll listen to my head. If I'm making a decision and I know that there's an emotion involved, I listen to my gut. Because it usually has the right answer. My head's probably the last thing I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask my intuition, and then I'm going to ask my heart, which is where God is. And then my head may have something to say about it, but
yeah. Well, I always encourage people, like, lead your heart. It's like if we're not leading our heart, then something else is going to lead us. And so the more that we can be in tune with higher power, God, whatever yours is, the more I'm in tune with scripture and the Bible for me, I know my days are better and I'm listening to that. And so I want to lead my heart forward and not let my heart lead me. It sounds contradictory to what most people say. Is like, well, listen to your heart. Yeah, but if your heart is full of a bunch of hatred and crap, then so you got to fill it, your head and your heart, and lead it, and in that way, you're going to go on a much better, stronger, more purposeful path than just flailing in the wind or hanging out in a ship without your sails up in the middle of an ocean. So,
and I think that's a great spot right there. Is for me, that hole is always going to be there. How I choose to fill it is up to me now.
Totally.
Now that I have my information, now that I'm educated about my disease, it is my choice on what I fill up that hole with. Am I gonna run over and open that door for that lady without expecting a thank you? What am I going to do with my life? And I would rather go to bed at night, putting my head down, knowing that I didn't hurt God's children, and that maybe I brought some hope today.
Amen to that, man. I love it.
So you also have some other things going on. I'm going to do some plugging here for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
Because you do some stuff with prisons now too.
Yeah, so I do some work with like prison fellowship and just anything with that regards. Because like one thing that was kind of cool is last year I actually got a bill passed into law. Because I owe a lot of restitution. It was at 12% interest rate, which I had no clue until I got out. But then I was able to get a bill passed into law after 3 years of work to reduce the criminal restitution rate from 12 to 8%.
Yeah. And
then people that are incarcerated are no longer being charged interest while they're locked up, which is huge victory. There's a lot more work to do. So if anyone wants to get involved with me on a criminal restitution reform, send me a message because I'm plugged in that regards. But I want to see change for anyone that has gone down the wrong path and it's not like they wanted to. They just got there.
If I was to say that people don't deserve a second chance, the AA meeting I went to, 22 relapses in 2 years. Go ahead, you guys. We're very patient. We don't shoot our wounded here. We don't do that. I've never fired a sponsee. I've never fired a client. No. We're here for life. So if we're talking to you, we're going to be here in 5 years. By the grace of God. So, and then you're a recovery coach. Let's hand out your phone number and website here.
Yeah.
You do that.
Yeah. Phone number is 970-331-4469 and website is liftedfromtherut.com. And last night I just announced this. I was doing a late night thing for those that are up late night.
Okay.
But any of the coaching programs I actually do, I'm doing a 15% discount in September because it's recovery month.
Awesome.
And so I've got 3 different ones launching this month about optimizing your life and finding your purpose in life. You can find all that on the recovery coaching tab on Lifted from the Rut.
And recovery coaches, those are good for you guys too. I'm any kind of education that we can do. So,
yeah, totally. We got to stick together, man.
We do. Rob, thank you for being here and taking your personal time to help us out and educate and tell your story. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. I can't wait to hear yours on the next one. I'm actually launching a brand new podcast next week in addition to the current one I do. So that's going to be kind of fun to have 2 different aspects of stuff. So
I'd be happy to be your guinea pig for the new one if you need one. So not a problem there. Yeah,
I'll let you know. We'll cross promote the other ones so people get both exposure. But I'll hit you up for that too, man. Keep doing your great work today, and thanks for inviting me on the show. I know you kind of usually go somewhere at 12 o'clock on today, and we kind of went over, but that's cool.
That's okay. I go to an AA meeting. They'll still be there when we get off.
You think? Yeah.
You're only late to your first meeting.
There you go.
Oh.
Boom.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And being a part of. I appreciate everybody and all their support. I hope what everybody kind of gets out of this is We are all in this together, and it is a we program. Recovery is about community and being a part of, and just being the best person that you could be every single day. So with that, we're going to wrap this episode up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Peace out. I love you all, and have a day.